If the Bible's got you tied in knots, if you're burdened with religious thoughts, come grab a drink and join the choir. It's Heretic Happy Hour.
Hey, my friends, welcome to the Heretic Happy Hour podcast. I'm so glad that you decided to join us for this podcast because, we here at the Heretic Happy Hour podcast, we know that you have many podcasts to choose from when you decide to listen to podcasts, and we want to thank you for choosing the Heretic Happy Hour. My name is Keith Giles. I'm the author of several books, including the one about to be released any moment now, which is Jesus Unexpected. It's about the end times and the second coming of Christ. And I'm also joined here by my co-hosts. I'll let them introduce themselves in a minute, but I also need to make sure I let you know that this is the first episode in a brand new series about conspiracy theories. That's right. Bring it on, baby. The truth will be exposed. You heard it here first. All right, guys. Introduce yourselves and say hi to our listeners.
Hey everyone, I'm Katie Valentine. I'm the author of Sex, Slavery, and Self-Control in a Pauline Community, but I feel like my whole life has prepared me when I heard that X-Files sound music go off for this very moment and talking about conspiracy theories. I can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, I have tingles.
From what?
The theme song, dude.
Sorry.
We're finally doing this conspiracy
I
theory
know.
thing.
The 90s are alive and I'm happy about it.
Bring it on.
Yeah. I am Derek Day. I'm the author of Deconstructing Religion. I'm a professional asshole, and I'm just happy to be here. This conspiracy thing, man, I'm built for this shit.
I know. I feel like, and I'm Matt DiStefano, the fourth and least favorite of all the hosts. And I'm an unprofessional asshole. But I am,
Freelance.
Freelance, yeah, that's right.
Just keeping that tally, Matt.
Yeah, I don't know. This is a weird time. There's a lot of conspiracy things going on right now. So I think this is a perfect time to jump into this series. So I'm super stoked for it. And super stoked to be with you all. It's been a while since we recorded. So let's get into it, man.
Yeah, buddy. Well, in case you want to reach us, we have a hotline that you can exercise finger dexterity to reach the Heretic Happy Hour crew. And that number is 240-343-7379. Once again, it's 240-343-7379. Get some weight lifting going for that index finger, y'all. And we have a text. With that being said, roll that beautiful text footage. So we have from an anonymous texter that, so first off, love your podcast, and so far everything I've read and watched is eye-opening at the least, if not mind-blowing and freeing. What's really weighing on me right now is what is starting to surface regarding the normalization of pedophilia. Would like to hear your thoughts on the matter. Frankly, it scares me if pedophilia would be a sexual norm in humanity. So, anonymous texter, thank you for weighing in on that. And to the team.
Yeah, thanks for just handing that right off to us, Derek. Wow.
Hey.
So I got to say, I think this is probably the most, I don't know, what do you say? This question is kind of out of left field here. I guess I know what you mean. I sort of out of the corner of my eye have seen people sharing posts about the normalization of pedophilia. Honestly, to me, at least so far, it seems that most of the sources, quote unquote sources for those kinds of news articles about the normalization of pedophilia, they don't seem to be coming from what I would call reputable sources.
Right.
And so it starts to feel to me like what it is someone sort of fear mongering and trying to stir up people to get them upset and angry about something that might not actually be a thing. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is a thing and I'm just not aware of it.
One of the things that kind of, I guess I get my crank gets turned a little by things like this because this was supposed to be the part of the slippery slope that when we said that it was okay for for LGBTQs to marry, that this would be the next thing.
Right.
And so I call bullshit on that, because basically what the deal is that when we talk about sex, right, sex between consenting adults is between consenting adults. It's,
Right.
Nobody's business except for the parties involved, right? But with children are exempt from that because they don't have the mental capacity or the maturity to make the informed consensual decisions that would be involving sex. So basically, when I think of pedophilia and this whole thing, I'm thinking of this in the framework of we're talking about conspiracy theories, and here we are, right?
Yep.
The pizza shop theories and the QAnon and all of that stuff. And honestly, in my opinion, it's a non-issue, because no one in their right mind is going to say. Honestly, no one in
No,
their
you're
right
right. You're right. No,
is
you
going to
know
say
it's
that sex with kids is cool. That's
that's
just
right.
fucked up. I don't care how you slice it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm not worried about this becoming a norm. Part of this is interesting because my whole book is actually about non-consent sexuality and how I believe that Paul was trying to take care of people in his community who could not consent to sex, including enslaved people, including children, including a whole host of people in the ancient world. So yeah, I'm kind of on the bandwagon of like really trace our sources. Who does it benefit to sensationalize normalization of pedophilia? Because it's usually an attack on on lefties or on people that are part of this gender sexual minority crowd. What I am interested in, though, is normalizing care for people who realize they were abused as children.
Right.
And taking that stigma away and providing really competent care and trauma recovery for those individuals.
That's really important. I mean, we really need to do that. And I think that there is a dearth, that's a fancy word for lack,
Thank you.
Of really good empathy and compassion for people that have gone through that. And I think that we need to do better with our outreach toward people who have suffered that kind of abuse.
Yeah, I think in this text, the term normalization gets a little bit confused because get a little bit confusing because there are some people who are going to those sensationalist articles, Keith, that you mentioned that really aren't credible sources, and there's always going to be like fringe people trying to normalizing this as a behavior in society. And we're in such a day and age. I don't know if it's social media. I don't know if it's just our access to information and going for sensationalist headlines and seeing those all the time. Then we see it because people like to share those kind of things, and then we think it's going to be normalized in terms of an actual like behavior that we engage in society. I'm all for normalizing it in terms of like being able to treat it or being able to help people who are oriented that way, if that's the right term.
Mm-hmm.
So if it removes like the fact that they're like awful, totally depraved in the Augustinian sense of the word, pieces of shit, like I don't want that to be a thing either. But at the same time, like addressing it as a mental health issue, maybe.
Yeah, totally. And I back in my very young adulthood, I worked for a year for a social work office, and the only clients that the therapy received were people who had committed sexual crimes. So people who had violated someone else's consent. And treatment is needed, right? So if someone believes that they have, that they're oriented this way, or that if that's the normalization that we're talking about, or they have this desire, they don't want to hurt someone, we need options for people to be able to receive therapy around that. And so that part's really important.
There, and I want to be very careful with that, is that when we talk about oriented that way, because
that's a poor word choice on my part. Yeah.
I don't ever want to juxtapose, compare, or conflate pedophilia with LGBTQ. It's
right.
not. This is not an
agree.
orientation. This is somebody that's got some fucked up things going on in their head, and they need help. That's what this is. So I want to be careful in using words like orientation, because what I don't want to do is try to fan the flames of discrimination or oppression against
Yes.
LGBT.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. And I don't want to. I don't want to stigmatize any sexual orientation. Yeah, I don't think pedophilia is a sexual orientation,
Right.
but it is the result of probably deep trauma on those
Mhm.
individuals' part. But we do need ways to talk. I think what I'm wanting to communicate is we need ways to communicate that unhealthy desire in a professional setting where people can explore alternates before someone gets harmed.
And Katie, I didn't want you to think I was correcting you. That's not what.
Oh no, I know.
No. My point is, I wanted to try to save you from a potential ass kicking down the road. Because,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Look at that. So yes, we'll address it on our podcast, Derek. That we're going to launch.
The Valentine's Day.
Exactly.
Valentine's Day podcast.
Cool.
All right. I want to introduce our heretic. This is a really special guest. The heretic that we have coming up wrote a book, and at the end of 2019, this was on one of the best of nonfiction books. So I happened to pick it up. Was completely enthralled with it, just loved it. The book is called In the Valleys of the Noble Beyond. You're going to hear all about it. And I was just so thrilled when we reached out to this author and he agreed to come on as our heretic.
It's the Heretic of the Week.
My name is John Zada, and some people might take me to be a heretic.
Hi, John. Welcome to the podcast, John. I am so especially enthusiastic, happy to have you here because I read your book In the Valleys of the Noble Beyond, which was published in 2019 by Grove Atlantic. And I read it at the end of 2019, and it was the best book by far that I read in the whole year. So I'm so enthusiastic to have you here. And just tell us, why would some people call you a heretic?
Well, I'm I guess for lack of a better word, mainstream journalist. I'm a writer, I'm a photographer, sometimes travel writer. I do a bit of work at a television news station here in Toronto, Canada. And so, I mean, certain subjects are, I guess, considered, taboo in the field of journalism, like fringe topics, like stuff like the paranormal or, controversial knowledge issues like Sasquatch and that kind of thing. So I think, people when they consider mainstream writers, they don't really think of them as tackling these sort of subjects. And so I took some time off and traveled to the west coast of Canada and spent some time with Indigenous people out there investigating Sasquatch reports. And so when people tend to hear the topic of Sasquatch and they think about somebody who wrote a book about it, even though they may be a journalist, they're automatically thinking, oh, this guy is, a bit off of his head, or he's trying to prove the existence of Sasquatch. And so, I mean, there were a lot of raised eyebrows over the years whenever I spoke with people, including my colleagues, and some of them reacted quite nonchalantly and weren't really fazed by it. Others, I think, probably scratched their heads and were kind of like, oh, what's he up to? So that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Wow. So wow, this is a fascinating topic, by the way. And so it seems like, though, you took a slightly different angle, kind of attacking or approaching this topic of the Sasquatch. Like you said, you weren't really looking to prove one way or the other whether Sasquatch existed. You wanted to kind of approach it from kind of a different angle. So, like, how did you approach it?
Yeah, well, I grew up, reading books about the subject as a kid, and you get two varieties of books that have been written throughout the years. The vast majority of them, or the majority of them, are books by enthusiasts who are convinced that the creatures exist, and they write these tomes that are a kind of an unfurling of the evidence kind of thing, right? And so, and then you've got you have the few odd skeptical books that are a bit more recent, and I really did want to go and find out one way or the other whether there was a reality to this. But as the journey unfolded, both the actual literal travel journey and also the literary journey, I began to see the possibility of not this kind of binary one or the other, black or white attempt to either prove or disprove, but to kind of look at both arguments and everything in between and around it. And so that seemed to be a much more rich approach to the whole thing, and just to kind of explore, what does the Sasquatch mean as a symbol, and what does it tell us about ourselves? What does it tell us about our belief systems, and all of that? Because there's so much more there to be explored.
Yeah, so this isn't Harry and the Hendersons. This isn't an episode of the X-Files. This is not Monster Hunting of the Week. I mean, even what you just said now, that little snippet, this is such a deep topic. So tell us, maybe you can give us just a 1 minute, 2 minute review of like, what are the possibilities of the meaning of Sasquatch beyond this binary, binary yes or no within the cultures that you explored.
Right. Well, and that's something that I, come to at the end of the journey, at the end of the quest, towards the end of the story in the book. And, I won't really reveal all of it per se, but I think generally speaking, by about halfway into my journey, when it becomes apparent to me that I'm not going to know the answer one way or the other, unless I actually see one. And if the creatures do exist, it is so rare to see one because, they are so avoidant of humans, that I decide to kind of focus my journey on looking at, what does it tell us about the nature of perception? Like, what does it tell us about, what does the Sasquatch tell us about how we see reality? And so I begin to unfurl a bit of the science behind, how we see things in the external world. It tells us about cognition, and belief, and also like why we seek out the Sasquatch. And I think, and that becomes kind of more the focus towards the climax of the book, because then I relate it back to me as a protagonist. Why am I searching for it? And so there's so much in terms of motive there, because people, if you talk to any Sasquatch enthusiast, they will, maybe perhaps to some degree explain their interest in it. Oh, this is such an amazing thing. It's this undiscovered animal. This is so cool. But the reasons can really span a whole variety, from seeking out adventure to wanting to have, I guess, a deeper sense of purpose in kind of uncovering something that is unknown or something that is mysterious, to, perhaps even, in a way, kind of seeking a symbol, which is something closer to a deity or a god or a superhero type figure, because the Sasquatch is this, humanoid being of incredible ability that can appear and disappear at will, seemingly incredible physical strength, ability to move around quietly, to almost kind of commune psychically with nature in a way. And so, like, I think a lot of people, although being drawn to the creature, aren't really conscious enough of why they are. And so the book was an exploration of all those types of ideas, and it became such.
So even golly, John, this is so interesting, because I think you are definitely taking this in a very different direction than most people I've ever heard talk about this topic have taken it. Just, kind of getting into the deeper psychological, like it's almost like in some ways, yes, you're talking about Sasquatch, but in a way you're kind of talking about me. You're talking about us,
Right.
like humanity, like why, what in us is fascinated by the Sasquatch? What is it? What does it say about us that we are so fascinated by the Sasquatch, and that there are some sort of deeper psychological, maybe even spiritual themes connected to this phenomenon? Whether and correct me if I'm wrong, it's almost like whether or not Sasquatch is real or not real is almost irrelevant to that discussion.
Well, yes, because in a way, you can apply the Sasquatch can also be other things. It can be ghosts. It can be UFOs. It can be. You could replace the Sasquatch as a symbol with other similar type phenomenon. I think each one differs in that it appeals slightly differently to different people because of what if people are really interested in space, for instance, it'll be more of a UFO thing. But then you also get people who combine them and everything. And so, yes, ultimately, it does relate to. The propensity of, I guess, the human being and the human mind to it's what we're seeking out essentially. It's about our needs, really, right? And I think that's even if it turns out that there is one gets hit by a truck one day and they find it on the side of the road. I mean, it still doesn't change the fact that people are drawn to it, not really knowing whether they existed or not. And people went out on a limb with a kind of faith, thinking or perhaps even concluding in their own minds beyond a shadow of a doubt that it does exist.
Yeah, I love that kind of. It feels like a quest, like where there's something very universal about our desire to have this quest to have the unknown be either a mystery or become known, or that kind of in between space. But one thing that really I just loved within the book was the respect that you paid to First Nation people, and I just got, as a learner, just got to learn a lot about the Pacific Northwest in Canada. That's probably the name we use in the US. In Canada, it's BC. Yeah. I guess the BC area. And so, but like just as an intro, what struck me was some of the tribes that you spoke with. The Sasquatch is like when you need an answer, sometimes the Sasquatch will appear and that gives you confirmation, if I'm remembering correctly.
Right.
But then for some tribes, it was like you need to make a change in your life. Sasquatch has appeared to tell you to like do a 180.
Right.
So I'm kind of curious, so there also is real deep cultural roots that maybe don't apply to other mysteries that we talk about. So yeah, I wonder if you could just explore a little bit about what your interactions were like and the kind of spirituality is tied to the land, tied to the people.
Well, so when you travel to this part of Canada, the province is called British Columbia. It's maybe the size of California, Oregon, and Washington put together. It's a huge area. I went to a place known as the Great Bear Rainforest, which is perhaps one of the most pristine wilderness regions, certainly in Canada, but also possibly in the world. You have a whole bunch of a cluster of small First Nation communities. We call them that here in Canada, Indigenous tribes that live in various parts of the coast. And so throughout their known history, these creatures have existed. And they go by different names in different places, but they tend to be fairly similar. They differ slightly as you travel further from one area to another, but they tend to be humanoid. They tend to be covered in hair. All of the same qualities that you hear in Bigfoot, Sasquatch type lore by non-native people, basically. And so, it's hard to kind of describe the ideas or the beliefs as being uniform because they differ from place to place. But I mean, generally speaking, they are supernatural. They are kind of tied to the land, to nature. They're stewards of nature in some way. Some communities consider them to be more benign, not dangerous, helpful. Others consider them to be a bit more troublesome. And I think what ends up generally happening is whenever somebody sees one, it's such a powerful, shocking, almost even traumatic experience. Again, not unlike what happens with non-native people, that people have to kind of make sense of it in some way after the fact. And I think that like either individually people come up with their own explanations as to why they've seen them. Sometimes the ideas are a bit more ingrained in the culture that have been around for a long time. And so, yes, I mean, I think there's in one community that I visited, if you are going through a difficult period in your life in which there is some reckoning required or some decision or some change, seeing one will be confirmation of that or indicate that to you, for instance. The same will happen in another community, except that by seeing one, it's not that necessarily you have a chance to change or better yourself. It's that seeing the Sasquatch is perhaps a kind of almost a death sentence or a kind of a curse. And so it differs from place to place. And it also differs from individual to individual. I mean, some people in some of these communities don't believe in a supernatural component to the creatures. They think it's just a flesh and blood animal. And so it really, really does depend where you're going. But on the whole, there is a kind of sense of deeper purpose and meaning to the creatures and having seen them.
Yeah, so it's not just about it's not about their existence. It's about the relationship of the meaning.
Yeah, it's
the individual,
and I mean, I mean, you also have to bear in mind too that these are also communities and cultures, just like in the United States, where you have a long tradition of storytelling. You have a whole pantheon of creatures. Most of them are animals that we know from the wilderness, but also there are also other beings that are not kind of that are not part of, let's say, the terrestrial Earth, uh, you know, um, animal world, let's say, and everything. So, I mean, it's part of that larger kind of narrative or storytelling tradition, and so they fit into that basically.
Yeah. You know what I think was so amazing, John, as you were talking about how there's one Sasquatch, but there's different tribes, and each of them have their own stories that they tell based on basically how they individually are trying, or maybe their ancestors who encountered Sasquatch, first sort of tried to interpret meaning to those encounters. And I think that is just an amazing metaphor for kind of like all religious experience. Like I can think of, this is also, you can take it to like maybe the Christian side of things, or Judeo-Christian side of things. It's like, there's one God, but someone might have an experience with God that was terrifying. And so to that person, they would tell you God is this terrible, horrible, wrathful being, and how a terrible thing to be in his presence. So someone else might have an experience of the same God and be filled with love and peace and joy and light. And that person would say, oh no, God is a God of love and peace and joy and light. But it's the same God. It's just everybody's having different experiences of the same, entity. But because they've experienced it a different way, they filtered it a different way. And then that story gets told and retold and retold and retold, and it then sort of seeps into the culture as if this is the only way to know or see or experience this being. And it's so fascinating. This is exactly the same kind of a thing I think we see happen through many other cultures and many other religious experiences.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think any powerful experience will elicit a very emotional response. But I mean, I think also too, the individual will project their own state onto what they saw. So, I mean, you hear some people who claim to have a very, beautiful experience, and that, okay, well, they were out in the woods, they might have been berry picking, and then they circled around the bush, and then they turned around, something they thought was watching them, and then they look and they see this creature, and they describe what is essentially a kind of this sort of timeless moment where they're communing with this other being, and the being appears, curious and benevolent and kind, and then it just walks away, and it's almost, and you could almost tell from the interpretation that, okay, maybe there were in their mind circumstances that led them to that conclusion, but at the same time, it's also maybe in the person's character or personality or inner development that they've gotten to a place where they're not really frightened by very much. Maybe they may not fear death. They may not fear death. So by seeing a Sasquatch, they're not afraid that it's going to kill them or something. Whereas somebody who maybe is of a different mold psychologically may see it in the complete opposite way and think, I thought this thing was going to rip my head off and kill me. I thought I was going to die. I mean, and to be fair too, to these people who are into this topic and who've studied it, both native and non-native, I mean, they will say that, well, there are also, this creature is a species. You get good ones, you get bad ones, you get nasty ones, you get friendly ones, and so your experience is also going to depend on that. But I mean, that's a different detail. But yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, and even in the deconstruction process for Christians, and I think too of how many people have told me, like, they used to interpret everything bad that happened to them as like the devil or as demons.
Right.
And then as they go on their journey, they may be having similar experiences, but their interpretation changes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so over the course of our lives, we have all these experiences that we interpret, reinterpret, and re-experience.
Yeah. And what I also think is fascinating too, and to back up a little bit to something you said way back in the beginning here, John, you were kind of talking about how for some tribes or maybe some individual people who had encounters, the Sasquatch could be either a sort of almost a sign of repentance, or a Sasquatch could be a sign from God or a confirmation of something or a warning of something. And again, it's that's so fascinating because I don't think any of us normally think of a Sasquatch as any of those things. But it's fascinating to think of us like the indigenous people who are living on the land, who are much closer to nature, who are interacting with, grizzly bears and otters and beavers and eagles and everything else. That for them to have an encounter with this Sasquatch would have this kind of meaning for them. Again, like the idea that a Sasquatch could be a sign of a need to repent or change their minds, or the Sasquatch should be a warning or a sign from God or a confirmation of something. That in itself is really fascinating. And I've never heard anybody say, I was out hunting with my buddies and I saw a Sasquatch and I knew I had to sell my house and move to Canada. Like,
right. Well, it's interesting. I mean, even if you talk to non-native people who have had encounters, I mean, if you go into that whole, non-indigenous world, I mean, you may not get the religious interpretation aspect to it, but you certainly do get a kind of a life-changing, event that is expressed to the point where you can get people who decide to pursue the creature for the rest of their lives and devote everything to it, including their money and their life savings, and to the point where they would break their family relationships up to people who, okay, maybe they wouldn't pursue it as an interest, but it would change the way they see the world, kind of thing. So I mean, there is that theme or that thread running through all cultures who have that kind of an experience, because it's so jolting in a way.
Yes.
Well, and how long did you spend in BC in your travels to research the book?
So I went on several occasions. I mean, the journey, the story of the journey itself that was recounted was about 3 months. And but I had gone a few weeks before, the year before. I went to go work on a magazine assignment, and that's where I decided to return to write a book about it. And then after the main trip, I went back several times to do further research, to write the book. I actually wrote part of it there in a cabin. So I spent a lot of time going back there, and because I realized after the main trip that I didn't really kind of know enough to do the book justice. So I went back for more.
Okay. Well, part of what I'm just, the whole concept that I'm loving about the concept, especially when you were talking about, going out into the woods, and we do feel vulnerable. And part of a search for Sasquatch, and really, I think the biggest conspiracy theory is that Sasquatch has been taken away from the First Nations peoples, and made into some kind of commodity of searching, of kind of monster quest that is not indicative of the experience that you describe in the book, or of the embeddedness of Sasquatch in First Nation culture. So that maybe is the biggest conspiracy theory about with Sasquatch, how we commercialize this somehow. But this is also, a highly intelligent creature. The descriptions that you described, that Keith just described too. And so it reminds us we're not as smart as we think we are.
Yeah.
Maybe predator might be a good word, but this whole quest reminds me, I'm not nearly as significant, although I think we're all significant, but within the cosmos, there are really cool, undiscovered, beautiful, terrible things.
Right. And it doesn't, one can even distill it further and almost say that, in a sense, Sasquatch is a personification, or in a sense, a distillation of, nature in and of itself, the sublime aspects of nature that people who go hiking or who go camping or who spend time in the forest come back and tell their friends about those moments that they can't quite communicate. They're ineffable in a way. And some people even call it the kind of the divine. And so, I mean, in a sense, maybe we're giving those phenomena a kind of form by describing them as a kind of wild, hairy, untamed wild man or wild woman or wilderness creature in a sense. We're trying to kind of almost capture or encapsulate or give form to something which is otherwise kind of almost impossible to describe, like God itself, perhaps. And that's why I equate to Sasquatch with a deity type being, because they kind of in a way represent the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, wait. Continue that thought. That's so intriguing. You can't leave us with that, like Sasquatch as a deity type creature.
Well, I mean, anybody who spends time outdoors or who's drawn to being outside and who goes to the mountains or who goes hiking or who goes camping, and who wakes up at sunrise to see this beautiful scene of splendor. Like when you're out in nature, there's this kind of connectedness or connectivity, this kind of oneness with the entirety of nature, with the entirety of creation, let's say, and those moments kind of they're hard to describe, right? I mean, they're hard. They really are hard to. It's hard to kind of come back from a really, really amazing trip in the desert, even, for instance. It doesn't have to be a forest and say, I had this incredible moment on this sand dune where kind of everything kind of made sense to me, and I really kind of like understood kind of the in a sense, the Sasquatch is a kind of symbol of that, but also God is a kind of symbol of that too. God is a kind of thing that we give form to that is kind of representative of the mystery of the universe, right? And in a sense, the Sasquatch is too. The Sasquatch is, in a sense, us projected into that kind of into that milieu in a way, right? And so that's how that is it to me is its most powerful manifestation is as a symbol of the mystery of life, the mystery of the universe, the mysteries of the forest, the mysteries of the ecosystem, and because in a way, like we always kind of do seem to need to give the world form, right? Like, I mean, I think that's part of the nature of the human mind, is to kind of represent experience, because we can never really convey something as we felt it.
I love that. And it's so true. I think of I know that's true of my own spiritual experiences. Words can't do it.
No, and who knows? Perhaps when and I mean, when somebody is in a kind of wilderness setting and their mind is somehow kind of they're a bit more relaxed in some ways, and just the visual spectrum is affecting their brain. I mean, perhaps their mind is picking up on something that doesn't exist in their repertoire of patterns, and perhaps they give form to that as a Sasquatch. And so these are the things that I kind of explore in the book that tend to not get, I guess, looked at in the more conventional takes on the subject.
Yeah, John, this has been the most fascinating conversation, and way more cool than I even expected it could possibly have been. Because what you just said right there was so cool, because again, in terms of deconstructing our faith, a lot of times what I will talk to people about is, we have to move from certainty. We have to start embracing mystery. We can't claim that when it comes to God that we know everything. We don't know anything, right? We have to admit that God is so far beyond our understanding. Yes, so then that means I can't claim that I know anything really about God. I can say I sort of believe right now, but I could change my mind as I continue to grow and mature in my understanding and faith. But I never want to get to the place where the cement is dry and I would say, that I know everything about God. And yet, so keeping that, I love that it's kind of a metaphor for the Sasquatch, because it's almost like you were saying, like, with the Sasquatch thing, like we are driven to know. And I know people that are so, like you said, they'll lose their life savings to, like, they want to shoot one of these things and catch it and put it on the 6:00 news, because, and that to me is the same kind of a mindset of somebody who says, like some fundamentalist Christian who says, I know for a fact this is exactly who God is and there is no question about it, because the opposite of faith is not doubt, it's certainty.
Yes, thank you.
And how crazy that the Sasquatch is actually a metaphor for that. I never would have even gone there, but that's kind of exactly what you've made me realize. That's really cool.
That's exactly it. And I think, again, going back to all these sorts of religions and various gods. I mean, they are symbols, right? And they're symbols that are designed to make inaccessible things accessible and easier to understand, and to kind of give them a kind of a more sort of terrestrial form. But in a sense, but at the end of the day, they're still symbols, and that applies, I think, to the Sasquatch too.
Well, and as a maybe as a to bring this back around to the Christian experience, the incarnation of Jesus in human form is really central, right, to the Christian experience. But I love this that for Jesus followers, well, listeners, you can debate me, but for Jesus followers, that the physicality of Jesus is really important. But Jesus is not limited to that, and like this parallel with Sasquatch spirit and the spiritual journey is so striking to me. So I can't wait to continue to explore that in my own soul space.
Yeah. So John, how can people find out about like your book and you, and are you working on any new projects that we should be aware of? Or
I'm writing something right now about that's more of a work about journalism and the news and the media and its effect on society and our perception of reality. And so that's sort of still kind of in the process of being done. And so I'm going to sort of keep the lid on that a little bit still for the moment. Sure. So, but people, if they want to sort of learn more, I mean, I've got a website. It's John, John, Zada, Zada.com. I've got like a lot of my travel writing and journalism and photo side and all the kind of stuff that I as a journalist do accessible there. And of course, the book is available on anywhere you can buy books online, on Amazon and at local bookstores and everything. And I think my original publisher is in the U.S. and so the book is widely available there, where I think most, if not all, your audience is.
Yeah. Well, John, again, thank you so very much for this incredibly stimulating and inspiring conversation. Thank you for this book. Thank you for your time. And wow, this has been great.
The journey.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah. Wow. You know what? That interview was just way more cool and deep and spiritual and profound than I thought it could possibly be, having a conversation about a big hairy monster that lives in the woods.
I am so happy that John could come on the podcast. He could talk to us about this, that we could talk about Sasquatch as this deeply spiritual thing and not only as monster hunting.
Yada, yada, yada. I want to thank you guys for not inviting me to the party.
Yeah, Derek. Hey, Derek, when are we going to start our own podcast, man?
Exactly.
So what? I don't know what is that. We could be like Psych, black and tan. You could be black and I could be tan.
There you go.
Yeah, black and tan isn't that a drink? That's a drink, right?
It's a drink and an Irish military unit.
Yeah,
right. Black and tan.
You have lots of topics.
You're the blackest dude on this podcast. So.
Yeah, Derek is tan.
Hey, can we have that as my bio on the website? We have to put that.
You can change it if you want, sure.
We'll have to talk to the producer about that one.
Yeah, we know him.
But man, what a great segue, what a great heretic of the week to lead us into kicking off the meat of this conspiratorial series. And we talked Squatch, and we're also going to get into other stuff like Nessie, get into Loch Ness. I don't know if it's technically a conspiracy. I don't know if Squatch is technically a conspiracy.
Right.
But we're going to get into that. We're going to get into Flat Earth. That's definitely a conspiracy. I love the Flat Earth one. That shit makes me laugh so much.
Yes.
I don't know how you want to kick this one off. Maybe we can just kick the whole thing off by talking about getting our Derrida on and talking about what is a conspiracy, making sure we're talking about the same thing. Make sure there's a unity of the word. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, you could go in and do that.
Well, I don't want to do that. I was kicking the can.
Well, everybody wants to have some secret information, something that they know that nobody else knows. And when you share with a few friends, then it becomes the privileged cabal, that they get to have this privileged information that nobody else has. And so when they share it, they kind of portray themselves as people who they have something that no one else has. So, hey, look at me, listen to me, and that's pretty much where conspiracy theories, I think, where they start.
Yeah, it's kind of Gnostic in its orientation. Like you got some special knowledge that no one
Yep.
else has.
Or someone has a special knowledge and it's being covered up, being hidden.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and so it's funny because when you talk about conspiracies, like a big one that's somewhat recently, although it's almost 20 years removed, is 9/11. And when people talk about that as a conspiracy theory, it's like, well, in one way, I would say someone conspired to do something. So then it's like, what is the conspiracy theory we were talking about? Because then you get into like the nuts and bolts of it, and there's a lot of different beliefs within each conspiracy theory.
Sure.
So that's true with like flat Earth, which we're going to talk about today. Like flat Earthers disagree with each other on the cosmology and all this, and where the cover-ups are. And I've heard listen to like flat Earthers call each other stupid about which of their flat Earth theory is
Which
stupider.
is so beautifully ironic, isn't it?
Oh, I love it. It's so
just
funny to
great.
me.
Oh yeah, like so. All right, so let's just. I think we agree. I mean, maybe technically, Sasquatch and Nessie and is not, really a conspiracy in the sense. Like to me, a conspiracy is there's some information that powerful people don't want the rest of us to know, and then that's like. That would be like, the UFOs or the moon landing or JFK assassination or even Lincoln assassination. Like there's always these, oh yeah, but there's someone who knows the truth about this and they don't want you to know because if you found out the truth, that would just be chaos or they would lose power and control. And that, to me, that's like the classic conspiracy theory. Sasquatch and Nessie kind of get lumped into that, kind of in that world, I suppose.
Well, it gets lumped into fringe.
Yeah, exactly. So, which one do we want to jump into first, guys? We have basically we've kind of mentioned a couple of these.
I kind of want to just like poll of the room, like who believes
I do too.
and Nessie are real and
should we do that with each like after we talk about each one? Can we do that? Like so let's talk about flat Earth and then we'll talk about it and then we'll say like, okay, who believes it and who thinks it's bullshit?
What we need is like a bullshit-o-meter.
There you go. That's right. Well, do we want to start with which one? Want to start with Sasquatch, Loch Ness? Let's pick something.
Well, let's start with Squatch since we had our guest and it's kind of what was talked about. Let's just say I'm very agnostic on whether Sasquatch is an actual being. I don't know.
Have you looked into it?
And I don't care. I watched Harry and the Hendersons. So.
No. I mean, have you?
Like Joe Rogan. Like Joe Rogan's big on it. I have. Some of the stories are interesting. Some of the encounters or so-called encounters are interesting. I have a hard time believing that there's no actual evidence. Like this motherfucker's hiding really, really fucking good, and I don't know. I don't know. Like I don't know how good you can hide for forever. There's too many fucking people in the world.
Yeah.
And technology is too good now too. I mean,
right.
They have heat detectors and all of this other stuff. There, you have to. I have trouble wrapping my mind around this.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just come on out and let the world know. I kind of lean towards that. I do believe it's real.
All right, here we go.
And I've even gotten to the point of thinking, you know what? Like one day, I should just get like a night vision scope on a 30-06 rifle and go out in the woods and like shoot one of these things and bring it home. Because that's the only way I believe anyone's going to actually prove it is if we really do, you're going to have to kill one and then like pull the body out and show it to people. But I also understand that if they are real, there's families of them. There's not just one lone Sasquatch. So quite a few of the people that have seen them have seen 2 or 3 of them at a time and have been sort of chased by them. So what I recognize is that if I did shoot one of them, even if I successfully kill one of them, the rest of them would beat the living crap out of me and I would never escape the forest alive. So maybe that's a bad idea. But I do lean on the field. I do think, and here's why, because this sort of legend of these creatures, it's global. It's not just in North America. It is in the Alps. It's in the Andes. It's in China. It's in, South America. Like and going back hundreds of years, we're talking legends that go back hundreds of years describing pretty much the same creature. And these kinds of testimonies continue even to this day.
Then post that shit on YouTube.
Well, right, and I think again, now I agree.
It's
That's
on
been
YouTube, so it must be true, right?
but that no, I mean, but let's say right the hard evidence right has been very slim, very hard to come by, and I will concede that there have been hoaxes, there have been people who wanted so badly to prove it that they have fake stuff, and that doesn't help the story at all, right? That doesn't make it more believable at all. Um, and actually in our interview we talked a little bit about some of the reasons why um, the Sasquatch are have been so hard to detect. I think they're really intelligent. I think they're very afraid of very wary of humans. They see us as a predator. They see us killing and eating other animals in their habitat, and those they learn to stay away from us. They're very very good at that. They I believe they have heightened senses and abilities that are similar to what we recognize in creatures like deer, or even as John mentioned in the interview, like what was it? He called it infrasound, which is something that tigers have. And so, and again, this is consistent with a lot of the testimonials people have had. I guess for those reasons, I tend to lean on. I think they're real. I'm not going to say they are. They absolutely are. I wouldn't say I know they are. Maybe they're not, but I just think there's more evidence that they are that there's not.
So I'm also a little agnostic, but my threshold for whether like that's and I'm putting real in air quotes every time I say it. I think
No,
this whole
exactly.
episode, whether Sasquatch is real or whether Nessie is real, my threshold for that is really low. I mean, like I don't really care. I think one way or the other.
True.
Obviously I loved the book talking about Sasquatch as kind of this human quest. But something that really stood out to me was that when John was interviewing and speaking with really respectfully the First Nations tribes in this part of Canada, they were like, it's never occurred to us that anyone thinks that Sasquatch is a myth because it's part of their daily fabric of reality. So they are shocked when other people don't think that Sasquatch is quote unquote real.
Right.
And so reality is partly what we kind of make of it. But we discover new species all the time. Granted, not usually really tall primates, right. But we do discover new species all the time. And so I'm like 51%. Why not? But 49%, we would have discovered this already. And then, but I think this is a lot of talking about conspiracy theories. Humans, we think so much of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then so little of ourselves that we have to attribute, like, I don't know, sometimes I feel like we have to attribute something to aliens instead of saying, no, that could be a work of human ingenuity.
See, I have two words: habeas corpus. Right? Produce the body. Where is it? I mean, somewhere someone must have a strand of hair, something that can be translated into DNA, something that something other than shadowy, bad photographs or bad, 8mm film. There has to be something. And this is the other thing too, why I think that people want to hang on to this is because humanity is suspended somewhere in the balance between evolution and creation. And so when the scales tip toward evolution, somebody wants to believe that, hey, there's this missing link, that what Darwin alluded to in his theory on the origin of species. Okay, so this missing link, maybe the Sasquatch, maybe the Yeti, maybe one of these tall primates, like Katie said, that one of these guys or gals is the link between the apes and the humans, and so we have this hope that we find this link, and that's where I think that people kind of fall into the trap of belief regarding Bigfoot.
Right. Well, here's the thing about that though too, and I understand what you're saying, and that definitely is one of the arguments sort of against it. Is that here it is 2020, and we don't have any hard evidence, and we don't have any dead bodies or skin samples or a high quality digital video of like absolutely proof of it. So that's a given. I give you that. But at the same time, we have creatures like, for example, the woolly mammoth, which is a prehistoric creature, but we have found them frozen in Siberia and even other places where they still have skin and hair and And we know that even they were contemporary with a lot of early Native Americans before many of the settlers got here. They were hunting giant sloths, which are these massive creatures, and they hunted them to extinction. And again, that was within the last 100 years or so. So I would say maybe 200 years or so. But at any rate, we know that there are creatures that we would classify them as sort of prehistoric or near prehistoric creatures, right? That have all died out, but there is some overlap with some of them. So I don't think it's beyond the possibility that this could be sort of a hominid ape-like creature. Maybe it's even a completely different strain of this creature that has somehow survived and managed to maintain secrecy. So, but again, we're not going to know until we prove them.
Yeah, and that's the place I'm coming at. It's like I'm not gonna. There's not a hill I'm gonna die on with this. It's just one of those things where it's like, okay, until you show me the evidence, I'm totally doubting Thomas. And when it comes to, if I was anyone in the Bible, I'd be doubting Thomas. I'd be like, all right, I gotta touch it with my hand. I gotta see it. I gotta see the proof. And until then, I'm gonna remain a skeptic. And I don't know. For me, that's a healthy place to be. If you know, but I'm not gonna sit here and say there's no way. It's not like a logical impossibility. I mean, evolution has shown that there are creatures that are like bipedal, non-humans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's totally possible, but
Yeah. Possible, yes. Probable, probably not. I don't know. That's
that's right.
Derek,
yeah.
The last 20 pages of that book you're going to really like. Like he talks about metaphysics and interdimensionality and Sasquatch.
Oh, like they're interdimensional time travelers.
Oh yeah,
that's one of the conspiracy theories. But like the idea of Sasquatch, that's something we're always pursuing.
Yeah,
we might be organizing it in our minds in this particular way that we now call a Sasquatch.
Okay, you had me at interdimensionality.
I knew I would. Well, so it seems like Sasquatch is pretty low bar threshold for all four of us. So I'm keeping a running tally. So Keith, I have you as a yes.
Yes, there you go.
I have Matt and I squarely on the I don't know, and Derek I have you as a no.
Derek's a hell no.
Let me put it this way: the bullshit quotient on it is very high. That's
gotcha. Okay. So this threshold is really low, but when we talk about something like flat Earth, the threshold is probably a lot higher, and the consequences are a lot higher. So
that's a conspiracy. See, to me, flat Earth is an actual conspiracy but it's the stupidest one of all, I think.
Well, and this is the one that for me, when it comes to any conspiracy, I always have this approach: why and how many people are involved,
right?
And if you and for this one, it's like, why the fuck is this happening, and how many people would be charged with guarding the damn ice wall? It's like we need millions of these fuckers, because it's like, well, how many? And we can barely get 5 of us together to do a podcast on every other Monday morning. You're gonna put all these people together to put up this conspiracy? It's got to be every astronaut, every astrophysicist.
Right.
I mean, get the fuck out of here.
And again, here's my thing about this theory too, on top of what you just said. And I think this is a test and a question for every conspiracy theory, but this one, especially this question, to me, just demolishes the whole stupid thing. Who stands to gain? Like, what is the great loss if tomorrow NASA came out and said, all right, everybody, you caught us. The Earth is actually not round, it's flat. Like, okay, who would lose their job? Who would lose power? Who would lose any control? Like, most conspiracies are about, you got to keep the secret, because if people knew, you would lose some kind of, prestige or status or power or wealth or something. But no, there's nothing at stake. It doesn't even make any sense. And again, so there's not really any stakes that matter. And like you said, Matt, every airline pilot, every commercial airline pilot, for every airline in every nation on this planet, we're talking thousands of them, they all have to know that the Earth is not actually a globe, because they've flown all over the planet. And yet every one of them is willing to take this secret to their grave.
To their grave, baby.
But for what reason? What do they gain or lose? Either way, it doesn't make any sense. It's the stupidest thing ever.
There was somebody that said that in order for the moon landing, and I'm kind of going off the reservation a little bit here, in order for the moon landing to have been fake.
And it was fake. Yeah.
you would need absolute secrecy of about 1 million people in
Uh-huh.
order to make that work.
Yeah.
1 million people, and you have to figure that the moon landing is a very narrow slice of history.
Mm.
I mean, what were they like, seven landings on the moon? This
Something
is a
like that. Yeah.
this is a
And then
very
there's also
slice.
Russia, right? So there were Russian astronauts also, sending
Well,
things
yeah, I
to
mean
orbit.
they never actually went to the moon though. That's the other thing.
But
Is
they
that
did orbit. Didn't they send something that orbited the
no,
moon, I think?
no. Actually, the only humans that have actually even been to the
No,
moon
no,
are
it was an unmanned probe, is what I'm saying. It was an
yeah,
unmanned
unmanned
craft.
probes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, heck, India has landed a probe on Mars on the moon. So that not really, not. But what I'm talking about is manned space travel to the moon. So if you say 1 million people just to cover this little slice of history, you would have to have a conspiracy requiring the absolute secrecy of literally billions of people. Billions. You know, billions of people that know and say, you know something? I, I'm just cool with not letting with not letting everyone know the world is flat. That and that that drives my bullshit-o-meter, way off the chart. It's like it's like a Geiger counter that's just gone insane.
So
When people start talking about flat Earth, I just can't. I mean, there are some people that I can talk with you about some things because some of this is interesting, even if I don't believe it. But when you start talking about flat Earth, man, I literally sail off the edge of the Earth on that one.
part of what seems to be wrapped up in flat Earth, like the religiosity of flat Earth among like very fundamentalist, born again, evangelical, the subgroup of the subgroup of the subgroup,
Mm-hmm.
is that again it's this human hubris to me, because part of the reasoning is that the Earth is flat, but it's not a flat disk sailing around in space. There is no space. Like literally the only thing that exists is the Earth, the flat Earth. And of course that positions humans as the top pinnacle of creation that have not stewardship but dominion of the Earth. And so again, to me, it's a conspiracy theory or a belief. It's more of a belief than a conspiracy theory. They think that there's a conspiracy theory that the Earth is round, right? But it's this belief that tries to position humans in this weird position within the universe. And I think the protest is that what I in my reading, the protest that I heard was, we're not just a speck on a planet that's a speck in the universe. And so there's this real discomfort with being insignificant.
It's putting Earth back at the center of the universe because the Bible puts us at the center of everything. And you're right. And it's sad to say that a lot of those flat earthers are King James only evangelical wacko Christians who, and see, they're the ones who see a conspiracy. They
Right.
see a conspiracy because, well, this is science versus the Bible. This is Satan and, atheists versus God and the Word of God, which says that the Bible says that the Earth is the center of the universe and there's a dome and all that bullshit. And see, that is just even more exposes the stupidity of this thing. Like, it just makes me even more embarrassed for Christianity that, like, here's yet another stupid thing that non-believers can look at us and go, these people are just morons.
Yeah.
And I can definitely explain the dome theory of how it's why it appears in Genesis the way it appears.
Please.
For the extra notes
Please.
afterwards.
Okay, we'll put that in the
Yeah.
bonus.
Yeah. So if you're not a Patreon supporter, you're going to want to check that out because
Exactly.
Katie's going to drop some knowledge on us. But I mean, this whole business about science versus Bible is just so absurd. I mean, the science was there before the Bible. Let's be honest. I mean, they were doing, yes, they were
No.
when,
Say what?
I mean, the Greeks were doing this. The Greeks knew that the Earth wasn't round because when at noon o'clock, high noon, they had a well and it shone straight down to the bottom. But then, I don't know how far, maybe a mile, maybe a couple miles, maybe it's 100 miles. I don't remember.
It's not that far.
It's not that far, but it doesn't shine straight down, which means that the sun is really, 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 really close, or the Earth is not flat.
Mm-hmm.
So I know some of these wackadoos say that the sun is really only like what, a couple miles away, and it's really tiny. I mean, no joke.
That's
I mean,
the
no
funniest
joke.
thing to me. The
There are
sun
some,
is
yeah.
only a couple of miles away.
I mean, it's some of these people say this shit.
Oh my
But
God.
it's just like, okay, well, whatever, man. And it's just like hovering around this flat Earth, and it's just like,
Yeah, look.
whatever, man. Again, like, how many people are in on it to dupe us? Every scientist ever.
Yeah.
Wait, Matt, you seem very well read. What are stars? What are other stars besides the sun?
Well, they're the things
so
that fall
confused.
they're the things that fall to the
Fall to
earth in the end of days.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you know,
All
they're
right.
the
Because it
third
has
of
to be
the-
literal.
We're going to catch
they're
them
the
and put them
third
in
of
a
the angels
box.
that got flung from heaven.
Sorry?
They're the third of the angels that got flung from heaven. Everybody knows
yeah.
that.
That tracks. That tracks. Okay.
Everybody knows that. Listen, just because some moron named Pythagoras in the 6th century BCE in Greece figured out by using this thing called math that that the Earth was round. I mean, come on. This flat Earth thing, it can't be wrong because they have thousands of members all around the globe.
It's
I've
quickly
seen
growing.
that tweet. It's probably the funniest fucking. It's the funniest fucking tweet I've ever seen.
And you know what? So many people
me say
join
something,
that. They join Flat Earth Society because they want the free T-shirt and they wear it as a joke. They don't think it's real.
It's a brilliant
listen,
joke.
I was in the Navy for 7 years, and I've sailed all over the fucking earth.
So you've
man.
seen the ice wall. You saw the ice wall.
Listen, I've been above the Arctic Circle. I'm what they call a blue nose. That's an actual Navy term. When you cross the Arctic Circle, you become a blue nose. And I've actually been off the coast of Antarctica. I've seen it at both ends. I've seen the farthest east, the farthest west, the farthest north, the farthest south, and there is no fucking ice wall. It just is.
Well, there is in the north and south. See, you didn't go far enough east and west.
You know what? Listen, there's a plain of ice, if you will, or there are mountains covered with ice, or there are glaciers or ice lakes. There are all of those things exist, but an ice wall that actually prohibits you from sailing over the edge. I'm here to tell you, as a 7-year Navy veteran, that simply doesn't fucking exist.
You're in on the conspiracy, man. You're in on the conspiracy.
Who
You just don't
told
want
you?
us
Who
to
told
know.
you, Derek, to say that?
Yeah, you're being paid off.
Yeah,
Obviously.
the Illuminati told you. They got you. They got another one.
Got it.
Listen, you know what? They don't pay me enough of my disability pension to say this. I say it because I fucking know.
Yeah, so I think this one's unanimous. The four of us would say this is absolute bullshit.
I got 4 check marks here. I got 4 check marks on my
Good.
list.
If any of our listeners take this seriously, I guess I apologize because we're just sort of mocking you mercilessly.
No, we're mocking the idea, not the people.
That's true.
The
Okay.
idea. I am mocking the idea.
No, I'm gonna take the L on this one, guys. No, we're mocking you.
Yeah, but again, I would say if there's someone who's like kind of played around with this idea, right? There's nothing wrong with being a free thinker, exploring all ideas.
Yeah,
but
okay.
I'm not a flat earther, but I do want us to have a T-shirt in the store if we can possibly have that. I need one now.
You're a very educated person. You're very methodical, but there's a thin line between a free thinker and a lunatic. Thin.
What I'm saying is, who does the theory benefit?
Right.
And if part of the problem is we feel too small and insignificant, that's a worthwhile thing to explore.
But not through this theory.
Not through the theory, but like that, if that's the fear that people are not wanting to do that kind of deep interior work, then I think that's a rich area of conversation. So listeners, send us a text message so we can help you with that interior journey. We would love to.
I'll give you.
I would love to.
You guys can call Matt and he'll help you out there.
Yeah, I'll give you Ralph's email.
Yeah, there you go.
Do we want to explore any others? I guess we're all in agreement there. For the first time on the Heretic Happy Hour, all the hosts agree.
Unanimous. Woo!
That's it.
Unanimous. Do we want to do HAARP? HAARP. That is the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. Do we want to cover that one?
I had to look this one up. It was not one I was all that familiar with, so I educated myself. But does anyone know a lot about it and have strong feelings?
Yeah, it's basically the premise behind it is weaponizing weather.
Yes.
And when we look at all of these, awesome hurricanes and tropical storms that are being formed, and they happen at greater frequency than they ever have, of course someone is tinkering with the weather. Come on, Katie. Come on, Matt. Come on, Keith. They're obviously screwing with the weather. Don't you know?
It can't be global warming or something.
Global warming. No, it's these radar arrays that they build in the northernmost parts of the United States in Alaska, and they vibrate at a certain frequency. And listen, let me say this. I believe that there is a way of weaponizing frequencies, and I do believe that there may even be some truth to weaponizing certain localized weather patterns. But when you talk about things on a global scale, on a hemispherical scale, that's when my bullshit detector goes off again.
Well, and see, for me, the mark of a good conspiracy is that there's nuggets of truth in it. So I think it's been shown that we've tried to do like cloud seeding,
yes,
to try to combat climate change. So that's a nugget of truth that we are able to try these things out, and that's not really the conspiracy is that like there's this cabal that's like killing us with the weather, and chemtrails probably gets into some kind of this stuff too.
Oh yes,
where it's like, again, I mean, you're taking maybe nuggets of truth, and then you're putting together 150 non sequiturs, and then you're just off the planet all of a sudden. Mm-hmm. The flat planet, of course.
Of course, the flat planet.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, I think
do flat earthers have conspiracies about HAARP? Because that has to be a Venn diagram that I need to see.
There's got to be.
That would be interesting. I don't know that there's much overlap there, but I think I kind of like what you were saying, Derek. I wouldn't rule it out that it would be possible for us to use some kinds of microwave energy, or I don't know what they're supposed to be using, whatever it is, to impact the weather. And like you were saying, Matthew, we know that there have been attempts to do similar things, to do something good. But so I guess for me, the jury's out on whether or not that technology exists or not. But I guess I've not seen anything to make me believe that there is some sort of a real conspiracy where, that people are actually. Here's one thing that I think is ridiculous. I think I did hear one time someone was saying it was a couple of years ago. There was a really bad hurricane that hit Florida, and someone said, "Oh, this was HAARP," and I said, "Well, wait a minute. Isn't HAARP like a U.S. based?" And they're like, "Yeah." Like, so wait a minute. You're saying we weaponize something against ourselves? Like, why? I mean, if we sent it against our enemy, maybe, but like, it seems like all these hurricanes are kicking the crap out of American cities. So that part makes no sense to me.
Well, it didn't, but see, this is where the nugget of truth is helpful and problematic all at the same time. Right. Governments test on their citizens.
That's true, though.
All the time.
Yes.
In very damaging ways. I'm not into a HAARP conspiracy, and I don't think we yet have the ability to control the weather. And if we do, we're doing a poor job of it.
Pretty bad job.
This is an ineffective experiment so far. But this is where we can get down. This is where I can totally see how people can get down a rabbit hole, especially when something is seemingly shrouded in secrecy. Like people believe that HAARP it's in a big barbed wire facility in Alaska, and people don't feel like there's transparency. When I looked at the funding, it seemed like they were okay funded, but not crazy funded either. And so some of that lack of transparency may just be they don't have a lot of money or people and how to do that. And so this is where the rabbit holes can begin, because we do see that governments can do damage to people. They don't always have our best interest at heart. I don't think they're causing earthquakes, though. They're not that sophisticated. No, our government's not that smart.
How does it go from the weather to earthquakes? Like that's the what?
It's the whole frequency thing, Keith. If you can trigger the right frequencies, you can generate earthquakes. The same thing. But
I'm not a meteorologist, but I think that global warming does increase frequency of earthquakes.
Yeah. But Katie, you mentioned Venn diagrams, and I just wanted to throw something in there that was just completely corny. That if you want to see a Venn diagram, you're so Venn, you probably think this conspiracy is all about you.
Oh boy!
Wow, where's the trombone soundbite?
Right back to the 80s and 90s. I'm loving it.
So here's what I want to say to me about this HAARP conspiracy thing. Because Wendy and I were talking about this last night, and I said, you know what? Here's the thing to me about this HAARP thing. And this might even apply to several other sort of quasi-government conspiracy theories. Now, look, if you are the government and you do have a top secret program that you don't want anyone to know about, you know what you don't do is tell the whole freaking world what it's called and where it is and what you're doing. For example, Area 51 for decades was, no one even knew what it was. You never even heard of it. Even when the name slipped out, no one knew where it was or anything like that. It's not like, in other words, it's not like the government said, hey, everybody, we got this thing. It's called Area 51 and here's where it is on the map. And you know what we do? We test top secret airplanes over there all the time. And yeah, that's what we do over there. No, you don't do that. If you're trying to honestly keep something a secret, then you don't, publicize. Here's the name of this program. Here's how it's funded. Here's where it's located. Here's related. Here's how the kind of general area we're working on. And then now you want to keep all that stuff a secret? Like, it doesn't make sense. It's just dumb.
Nope.
Oh, one other thing that I was just considering with HAARP, with, anything where we try to put responsibility of unfortunate, tragic things that happen to the earth, to people, to the planet, means to me that we're trying to pass the buck. And I say that collectively because it's much easier to say, oh my gosh, HAARP is causing an earthquake or HAARP is causing flooding, rather than saying, actually, some of that is just part of what it is to be on the planet. And then part of that are results of human actions and that we could take responsibility for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about you give up your internal combustion engine and your air conditioning there, you selfish bastard?
Not when it's this hot, man.
No.
Not when it's this hot. Yeah, but all right. Well, gosh, was this a good way to kick off the conspiracy theory series or what?
Oh, wait, I need your yeses and nos on HAARP.
Oh, I'm a no. I'm a no.
I think I'm definitely a no.
Yeah, this one ranks right up there with the flat Earth for me. So
no, nothing ranks up with the flat Earth.
We need some swag or something. Like we all agree on these two things. I'll keep a running list throughout the series.
Okay, our swag can be the Heretic Happy Hour. We're all sheeple because we buy into the standard government truth.
Hey, get that same caricature of all four of us, but as sheep.
That's perfect. All right. Well, I would love to keep going. We are going to keep going, of course, in our Patreon. But I want to tell our listeners that we do have a website. We do have swag. We do have merch. We got hats, sweatshirts, T-shirts. We even got pillows. So go check out heretichappyhour.com. Stay up to date on releases and check out our store. You will not regret it.
We also have 2 Facebook groups. We would love to have everyone join Heresy After Hours, free, open to everyone. All podcast listeners are there. We have great conversations, and occasionally one of us will do a Facebook Live or something like that. We all 4 interact with the group all the time. And our Patreon group is exclusive for our Patreon members, for our patrons. And we really interact with the group in there. We love interacting. Thank you so much for supporting us. Yeah, and we'd love to answer all your tough questions. I might even do a Facebook Live whenever this airs about Genesis 1 and the dome.
Ooh, sweet. Yes, and hey, by the way, thank you all of you who support us on Patreon. We just really, all of us want to just say, it means a lot to us because, we love this podcast. We have so much fun doing it. We cannot wait to share with you every time a new episode comes out. We love hearing your reactions. We love hearing your feedback in the Heretic Happy Hour Facebook group. And we especially, because we appreciate it so much, we've decided to kind of go back and add some new tiers and change some of the bonuses that you get, some of the sort of thank yous that we provide for each people at each of the tiers. So head on over to the Patreon page. It's patreon.com/Heretic Happy Hour. You'll notice that the $2 level is stayed the same, but we've added a $10 level. That's brand new. And under that level, you'll get PDFs of all of our books, or a lot of our books from Choir. And we have a $25 level, where there's Zoom calls, where every week one of us will post a sort of a special video where we'll expand on a topic, and you got to get to hear from each of us, a different one of us each week at that level. And the $100 level is going to be the same as well. But go over there and check it out. If you're not a supporter yet, please do, because we always record bonus podcast content, bonus interview footage to share with everybody who supports us on Patreon. Go over there and check it out. And again, thank you very, very much for your support.
And I want to let you guys know that you can go and visit iTunes and you can rate this podcast. And we really would love for you to give us the very best, the very highest rating. And not just because we think we're swell people or anything, but there's some very hard work and very loving, painstaking work that goes into making this podcast interesting, informative, and fucking funny. So give us 5 stars because we are the shit. Okay?
We're not sheeple.
We're not
We're not
sheep.
We're not sheeple. I feel like this puts the parable of the lost sheep in a whole new light.
Yep, that's right. I like it. I think it's funny when Christians call people sheep. It's like, wait a second.
I know.
They my sheep. They know my voice.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't you follow a shepherd? I don't know.
Right.